So you have the pulley on now and you want to put that belt on. It's pretty much the exact same way that you took your standard belt off. The only difference is you have to decide where to put the belt on the teeth of the pulley. I decided to just leave one showing because it looks like it lines up pretty straight with the tensioner and whatnot. So yeah, that's what I'm going to do with that one. With the L67 Supercharged engine pretty much done, it's time to take out the old engine. Now, it's all pretty much your basic standard removal. Remove like power steering lines, fuel lines, exhaust, radiator hoses. There's, you know, pretty easy to get to the belt housing and whatnot. Only a few bolts there. Take off the starter motor the same way you take it off the L67 or supercharged engine, and yeah, it should be quite simple to get out. Obviously remember to take off the 4 bolts that hold the engine mounts to the cross member. So the engine is half out of the car. You know, it went all pretty good. The only thing I sort of forgot to loosen off was the steering rack lines. So they weren't pretty tight, so I figured I'd just take off the entire power steering pump and then I'll deal with that later. But other than that, it all seems pretty good so far. Nothing else connected. I just had to disconnect a few of these vacuum lines. Clutch looks to be an alright nick from this angle. I'll have to swap these engine mounts over as the one on the L67 stuffed. But yeah, pretty much ready to drop this one on the ground and chuck in the supercharged one. Alright, so the engine's out now. I proceeded to remove the engine mounts on this one because my ones are pretty destroyed. I decided to take the whole bracket off to make it easier, and when installing it will make it a lot easier as well. Now we've moved on to the clutch aspect of things. I'm going to inspect the clutch, take it off, take the flywheel off, have a look. With this installation of the clutch on the L67, you're supposed to get 2 dowels put into the back of the crank of the L67 because, you know, there is no dowels at the back of it, and you're supposed to get the flywheel mirror balanced to your flex plate that was on the L67 because it was an automatic engine when it came out of the factory. Now, I may not get the dowels drilled into my crank only because I will just be getting the flywheel mirror balanced. Alright, now that the flywheel's at the machine shop getting all done, I figured I may as well show you guys another bit you may want to get onto while you have the engines out. We're back at the supercharged engine. Now, I've taken all of this backing plate off, the bolts out and whatnot. Behind here is a couple of oil galleries, a couple of water galleries, a cam and all the rest of that sort of stuff. Now, I just wanted to show you guys what a dirty one looks like. As you can see, all the rest of, you know, this corrosion's happened here, this seal's gone compared to a clean new one, well, cleaned up one. Also, as you can see, this oil gallery's got a bit of residue in it here there. Now what can happen is when these seals or gaskets break on either side, water can get into the oil, oil can get into the water, sort of thing. And a lot of people have this idea that with a lot of these engines the head gasket's gone, but a common occurrence is when you have milky water is that it's just this backing plate gasket has been broken. So while you have the engine out, change all of these little things. You'll thank yourself later. And yeah, a little tip when installing these bolts back into the backing plate, get a little bit of high temp gasket sealant and just run a tiny bit around the edge like so, and even if I can get that one in there, on the edge of that, just to seal up, because if these seals do break or get worn out or whatnot, liquid, oil, water will seep through them, and you know, you don't want that to happen. Alright, now the flywheel's on the back of the supercharged motor. Now, when I was putting this on, I had a bit of trouble getting all the bolts to line up. But, you know, just keep persisting, move it around and around, and eventually you'll find it. This is, to confirm, the standard ECOTEC flywheel that came off my VS. It's a solid single mass flywheel. It will fit, and you shouldn't have any dramas. Just move it around and whatnot, and eventually you'll find all the bolts will line up and it should go on nice. Alright, with the pressure plate on, I've just got it held on by the 3 dowels and a couple of bolts, a few threads into it. I just wanted to mention, I recommend using a clutch alignment tool when doing something like this. A lot of people do it by eye, which is fine, but with me personally in the past, I've done it by eye a few times and engine won't go onto the gearbox spline and thought, what is it? And then eventually it was the clutch wasn't aligned properly. So it's simple as just putting that in there, seating it properly, tightening down the other bolts on the pressure plate, and you're good to go. Alright, so the engine's in the engine bay now. I got a bit carried away and forgot to record me extending the injector wires and a couple other things. Now, what I had to do was, just so you guys know, is on the left side I plugged in all the injectors and everything like that, and then I had to extend from about the back here the injectors on the alternator side. Now all I did with that was pretty basic, just got a couple of these joiners which you can just pick up from like J-Car or any automotive store or whatever, wrap them in some electrical tape and all the rest of that just so you keep them nice and clean. The other wiring I did extend was the crank angle sensor, which is this one here, as you can see. There is the temperature sensor that also needs to be extended, which I didn't do because I don't really care about that considering it's going into a track car, and I'm going to just get a water temperature gauge and a couple of other gauges to monitor everything while it's on there anyway. So that's where we're at the moment. We're just going to be dropping it in probably in about 10 minutes, so hopefully everything seats and lines up, and yeah, it should be good to go. Just remember, got to jack the gearbox up because the mounts on that gearbox are seated quite far back, so get a jack under there, jack the gearbox up over the power steering rack so you can see it, then you should be able to lower it, and it shouldn't be too much drama getting it all seated and fitted properly. Okay, so the engine is now in the car and mounted. What I went and did was, when I was lowering it in, all the rest of that, I noticed that for some strange reason I couldn't get it to line up on the passenger side, and this is the ECOTEC passenger side mount. It's a little bit different too, if I can get you a good angle on this mount, which is off the L67. Very similar, but I couldn't seem to get it to work in the way I wanted to, so I swapped it over. And what I eventually did was I just took both mounts off, lined the engine up with the gearbox, put it in the spine, into the clutch, all the rest of that, then jacked the engine up whilst having it on the engine crane, like pretty high, so I could fit the left and the right engine mount on, and it worked really well. You know, very easy to do. I started with the driver's side first and then went to the passenger side. If you got one of these levelers, it makes a hell of a difference, makes that a lot easier. The mounting points I used for that leveler was, I've disconnected them, but just the exhaust manifold studs. And yeah, so now I've just taken that off, going to hook the exhaust up. The wiring should be pretty straightforward from the VS loom, considering most of it will just be plug and play and that you've already extended everything. So yeah, let's get to doing that. So the engine's in, hooked up, has fuel, power, the ECU's done, belts are on, and it runs really well. I gotta say, this is one of the easiest conversions I've ever done. pretty much just a plug and play after you're done extending the ECU of the original ECOTEC. Now, I did have a slight problem with getting it fired up in terms where I had power to everything except the fuel pump wouldn't work and the injectors weren't pulsing. Now, what it turned out to be was the key not registering with the like in terms of turning the security system off. Now, the way the key works is it has this little like nipple thing, I guess you would call it, on the end of it right here, and if it doesn't sit properly with the barrel and register, the fuel pump won't work and the injectors won't pulse. So, you know, it was a little messing around, but I'm glad it was something that simple. The MEMCAL I'm using is the Auto L67 MEMCAL Supercharged one, just plugged into my standard VS computer. I was surprised that the aftermarket MEMCAL chip I bought was not working, but you know, whatever, it all works now and I'm glad that it's all done. Another quick thing is, might be a bit obvious but may as well point it out, fuel lines. This back fuel line goes onto the back of the rail, this front fuel line goes on the front of the rail. I only say it might be obvious because I had to switch these around because this one would fit that, but this one wouldn't fit that. So once you, these are these are the standard ECOTEC ones. So yeah, that works that way. Now, what else? So with the 10 psi pulley, I've heard that it can sort of lean out at the higher RPM running a standard VS fuel pump. I'll let you guys know how that actually works because I'd rather test it than go and buy another fuel pump for no reason. I've heard some people using the standard fuel pump and it works just fine. Other people say may as well change it, but I'll be the judge of that. So yeah, once again, one of the easiest conversions you can do for power gains. ECOTEC comes out standard with out of the VYs and whatnot, they come out with 149 kilowatts. And this L67 out of the VY comes out with 171 kilowatts standard with 370 newton meters of torque. That's a 70 newton meter torque gain from the ECOTEC. And with a 10 psi pulley, theoretically, this engine should be putting out at the flywheel about 185, maybe if you know you're generous, 190 kilowatts, and probably over 300 newton meters of torque. Over 400 newton meters of torque at this point. So you know, cheap upgrade in terms of the engine is only $900, and you won't have to really change anything except chuck your old loom onto your new engine and just away you go. I'll fire it up for you guys so you can see how it sounds. The exhaust isn't hooked up, it's just gonna be firing out of the extractors. So yeah, hope you like it. As you can see, it runs. That sort of smoke there is just from all the inox and WD-4 they had on the extractors. But yeah, it runs and it's awesome. So once again, anybody wanting to make a cheap power upgrade for their Commodore from easiest swap from VS to VZ, the VZs that came out with the ECOTECs. I'm pretty sure they did. If they didn't, don't quote me on it. This is the upgrade for you. Now, one more thing. R31 conversion videos is I'm going to probably go a different route in terms of doing another manual conversion. I will get all the information out about the manual conversion, but what I'm trying to decide on now is I'm going to put a RB20 and an RB20 gearbox into it, turboed RB20. And yeah, see how that goes. Now I'm not too sure if I want to do it in a wagon or if I want to do it in a sedan, but you know, if you guys have any suggestions, let me know and I'll go ahead and do that. I was thinking more, you know, I've already done a wagon, so maybe I'll do a sedan, so then we can look at, you know, coilover upgrades and all the rest of that in it. But this project's done, and yeah, the next projects will be coming shortly. Hope this helped, and if you enjoy the video, you know, do the whole subscribe thing, like and whatnot. Hopefully somebody else likes this sort of stuff. Anyway, enjoy.